Welcome to this case study. So today I want to talk about how I lost $60,000 on my mobile home park. So this case study is very painful for me, but I want to be fully transparent as I always am. I lost $60,000 on my mobile home park. I bought this mobile home park while I was doing my value add apartment complexes on my 26 unit, my 20 unit, as well as my mobile home park. So I was doing three deals at the same time. I bought this deal 3 months after I bought my 26 unit apartment complex, and I thought this deal would be a killing for me, to be honest, but ended up being one of my first losses in real estate. And why I want to share this story is not to show that I'm a mobile home park expert or guru or anything like that. It's more to kind of share the lessons that I've learned uh, by owning and operating a mobile home park for the past 2 years. So I have a lot of battle scars that I've learned. I know people shiny object syndrome into mobile home parks like me. After you've owned an apartment complex, it's a very natural progression. So I really just want to create this to kind of show you what I learned along the way and all the challenges that I experienced along the way and in hopes to maybe make you reconsider your mobile home park deal. Like I said, I don't know what a good deal would look like given my experience, but I can definitely tell you what a bad deal looks like, and I feel like that adds value in a way. So learn from my pain, learn from my experience, and hopefully you will not fall in the same trap that I did, and you won't lose money as well. So that's the point of this case study. So let's dive right in. So this is why I invested in mobile home parks, and you might have heard this a lot if you listen to any podcasts like Bigger Pockets or the Mobile Home Park Investing podcast. But these are typically the selling points that mobile home park syndicators and investors will tell you to get you to invest in their deals. And I definitely drink the Kool-Aid, but the main reason is it's a lot of mom and pop owners. So historically, mobile home parks, they're owned by mom and pop. They typically live on site and they manage everything themselves. They have very poor financials. They kind of take care of the property management duties as well as the maintenance. So because it's not institutionalized, there's a lot of opportunity to go direct to seller, which I'm a huge fan of, right? I bought both my apartment complexes off market using direct mail, and I thought, okay, since there's a lot of mom and pop owners in the mobile home park space, then it's a natural progression to go from apartments to mobile home parks because I already know how to talk to mom and pop owners, right? So, that's one nice appeal was okay, if it's majority mom and pop owners, there's probably some value add potential, just like my two apartments. It was self managed by mom and pop, and they haven't raised their rents in a while. Maybe they didn't maximize the rents, and I kind of saw the same thing for my mobile home park. It's 200 lots, and only about 40 out of 200 were occupied. There were maybe 20 to 30 homes that were there that need to be renovated, and maybe about another 15 homes that need to be torn down, and the rest, the lots were good, ready to intake or infill brand new mobile homes. So I just thought, okay, this is what I'm used to doing in apartments, and it's a natural progression. So that's what I thought, obviously. So that was definitely an appeal. Was mom and pop owners. The second piece is creative financing. So it's very, very, very hard to get financing for mobile home parks. I think it's a little bit better nowadays, but even then, your options for financing for mobile home parks, going to a traditional bank, traditional lender, Fannie, Freddie, it's a lot harder. But what's nice about mobile home parks is the owners are used to selling it using creative financing. Like, to be honest, I sold my park with creative financing where they took over the first note position that I had, and I did a seller carry second. When I purchased this park, it was owned free and clear, so the seller financed me the deal. And this is very common with value add real estate because the financials do not support the numbers that a lender would be comfortable with. So with huge value add mobile home parks, creative financing is probably the only way you're going to go unless you just pay in all cash. I mean, you can do a hard money loan, but given today's interest rates, filming this in November of 2023, it's probably going to be about 12 to 14% interest only right now. So in order for to buy a park, especially a value add park, credit financing is normal. The mom and pop owner or prior owner probably bought it using credit financing, so they're more privy to the fact that they might have to sell this park with credit financing, or do a seller carry second to reduce the down payment. So that's what I did, and I knew I had to do to make it a more attractive deal to sell. So that's why I invested in mobile home parks. I love credit financing. I teach it, I use it, and there's a lot of benefits to it. So that's like, once again, this kind of makes sense for me to go into. The next bullet point is affordable housing. So you always hear this, right? Like, mobile home parks are affordable housing. It's a great way to have the American dream. You can get a brand new mobile home for like 45K, and you can get amazing financing. Not amazing, but in terms of, like, you can do low down payments of 5 to 20% depending on what your tenant qualifies for. And also, they don't really care as much about your credit score. I mean, obviously it's nice if you have a good credit score, but if you don't, they have an option as well. It's just going to be a higher interest rate. So where else could you get a brand new home for like $45,000? 3 bedroom, 2 bath, single wide. And you're probably paying about maybe $900 a month for your mortgage, and then maybe another $200 for lot rent. So it's $1,100. You own the house, you're a homeowner. So that's what really appealed to me to this, right? It's for the cost of $1,100 to own your own mobile home. That's typically rent in for a 3 bedroom, 2 bath area. So instead of renting a 3 bedroom, 2 bath, you can own your own single wide, own it yourself, and have the American dream, right? You own a home. That's what people want to do. So that's what also really appealed to me about this deal. Next bullet point is recession resistant. So you hear this a lot. This is always a selling point for mobile home parks and self storage. And why it's recession resistant is because it's affordable housing, right? Like, the intent is, if you can't afford to live in a single family home, you move to an A-class apartment. If you're in an A-class apartment, you move to a B-class. B-class, you go to C-class. And C-class, you move into a mobile home, right? And then for mobile home, you're at that point going to be borderline homeless if you can't afford to live in a mobile home. So it's recession resistant, where it's affordable housing. Like you said, if you own the home and you're paying lot rent, it's only like $200-300. Like, where else could you get rent for $200-300 if you own your home free and clear? So that's the appeal, right? We're going through a recession right now, so it's definitely even more popular. Next one is shrinking supply and growing demand. So why is there shrinking supply? Because a lot of these mobile homes, they get demolished by developers, and they want to build apartment complexes. Like, for example, my mobile home park is 55 acres. Not in the greatest area, but if they were to repurpose that 55 acres into a bunch of high rises or a single family home community, then they could kind of gentrify the area, and they can sell those homes for like $200,000 per home, and you'd probably need about maybe half an acre per home. So if you have 55 acres, you can have like 110 homes and sell those each for around $250,000-300,000. So because of that, a lot of these mobile homes get repurposed for higher and better use. And there's also a growing demand because, like I said, affordable housing. We don't have as many houses being built as people who need houses. So because of that, there's a demand for housing. There's a demand for affordable housing, and mobile homes kind of help bridge that gap, right? Because on my 200 lot mobile home park, I had about 160 homes to infill, so I can provide 160 homes at 45K each, and it's very affordable, right? So that's why it's shrinking supply and growing demand. And if you do biz economics, it means that they become worth more and more. So that's good. The next one is mobile home parks are a cash cow. You heard this all the time. Wow, this cash flow focus, cash cow, right? And this is definitely true if you did the tenant-owned home model. And later I'm going to talk about, tenant-owned home versus the park-owned home model. Mine was the park-owned home model, which maybe led to my downfall. But if you had the tenant-owned home model, it's a cash cow because if you look down, it's lower expense, right? Because when the tenants own their home, they deal with any maintenance issues. If their water heater breaks, then they're responsible. If they have to mow their grass and their lawn, they have to take care of their water and their trash. So when things break, like their skirting, the roof, the plumbing in their unit, whatever it is, the tenant's responsible. And as the landlord, you just collect something called lot rent, and the property manager that you pay just needs to collect the lot rent every month. So there's lower expenses. You have lower expenses. You have cash flow. And imagine you have, whatever, $200 for lot rent times 200 lots when it's full. This could be a cash cow, and that's why I wanted, right? I have a bunch of single family homes in California, more appreciation, not so much cash flow, so I wanted a cash cow, which is why I bought the park and was hoping to do the value add strategy. The next bullet point is sticky tenants. So if a tenant moves their mobile home into your mobile home park, it costs around $3,000 to $5,000 just to transport that home, hook it up, install it, and then skirt the home. So as a result, the tenants are sticky. Like, a lot of these tenants don't have $3,000 to $5,000 just to move their mobile home willy-nilly, right? It's better to usually just sell that home to another tenant and then buy another new mobile home yourself, and you might come off ahead. That's why sticky tenants are nice, because it's hard to sell the home and it's expensive, or not hard to sell the home, but it's expensive to move the home, so it's easier just to sell the home to another tenant who's going to pay you lot rent, and then they're just going to take the money and go, buy another mobile home. So that's why they're sticky. Next one is shiny object syndrome. So I'll first admit that, I had shiny object syndrome. I bought the mobile home park because I just thought, hey, I already own an apartment. It's a great idea to buy apartment or a mobile home park. Looking back, that's stupid, right? I should have just bought another apartment complex in Oklahoma, but instead I had shiny object syndrome, and this is one of the reasons that led to me losing $60,000. And the last bullet point is, which I mentioned multiple times, it's the next logical step after apartments, right? Like, as I described, it's very similar to my apartments, or so I thought, and I thought it was the next logical step. So these are the reasons why I invested in mobile home parks, and probably the reasons that you've heard from other investors. Let's talk about different types of mobile home parks. So there's two models. There's the tenant-owned home model, or TOH, and I'm going to also talk about the park-owned home model, which is the POH. So my park was majority park-owned homes. I did have a few tenants who were tenant-owned homes. So I had a good mixture of both, and got to see both sides of the coin. If you listen to a lot of the podcasts and a lot of these indicators, they prefer the tenant-owned home model because obviously it's less maintenance. They just pay you the lot rent, and it's a lot easier to scale that model. So what is the tenant-owned home model? So once again, the tenant owns the home and pays you lot rent, right? So lot rent is the price that you have to pay to have your home there, and sometimes it's just the cost of having your home there. And in the southeast, lot rent's around $200 to $250. If you're like in California or the coastal states where it's more expensive, it might be getting closer to $1,000. So yeah, relatively speaking, it's relatively inexpensive. So ideally for this tenant-owned home model, the tenants are direct billed for the water and trash. So that means that, let's say you're lot number 40, you're going to get direct bill from the water company for your water, and you're going to have to pay for your trash cans. That's ideal, right? But some parks, the lot rent includes water and trash. So that's what happened with my park. My park, we charged about $200 to $250 for lot rent, but that included water and trash. So to be honest, probably kind of broke even a little bit on that. And then the tenant is responsible if anything breaks down their home. So if the water heater breaks, any appliances break, flooring, wall, roof, skirting, whatever breaks, they're responsible. So that's what's nice, right? You don't have to deal with that as the property manager, as the landlord. Tenant is responsible for everything that breaks. The tenant just needs to comply with the rules of the park, right? So are they maintaining their lawn? Are they storing junk outside? Is their skirting clean? Is their roof look presentable? It just needs to comply with the rules of the park to maintain that nice aesthetic outward appearance. So it's a lot easier. This model has lower operating expense. So typically it's around 35 to 40% of your operating income of your gross rents. So that's your operating expense ratio. Keep in mind in apartments, it's around 50% for our context. So because the tenants own their homes, because they're responsible for their own water, trash, your main expense goes to maybe common areas like common area lighting, maintaining the roads, uh, maintaining some common area lawns, paying for property management, paying for the office unit. So that's where your expense typically goes. And this model, tenant-owned home, is more common in the higher cost of living markets. So just think the coastal states in the southeast, like Alabama, Georgia, those areas. It's more common to have a park-owned home model. And the tenant-owned homes have better lending options. Typically, Fannie Freddie loans, they want you to have majority tenant-owned homes. I believe it's like 80% at least. It changes all the time, but to my knowledge, it's about 80% tenant-owned homes, and it's okay to have a few park-owned homes, but they really prefer the tenant-owned homes because it's less risk, and it's more difficult to evict tenants when they own the home. So this is the struggle that I went through personally. Was the tenant owned their home, they're paying $200 a month in lot rent, or they weren't paying, and I was trying to evict them, and it was very difficult. I had to go through a court process. The court process took a long time because it was during COVID at the time. So during COVID, they would claim that they would have symptoms of COVID, so delay the court date even further, and it would end up costing me like almost $800 to evict these tenants just to collect $200 in lot rent. And what would happen is they would basically put a lien on that property, so when it's sold, I would get my money back, but they basically owed me like a year's worth of lot rent, like $2,000, and sometimes those homes that they owned weren't even worth $2,000. So I would just get all the money. So it was very difficult to evict tenants with tenant-owned homes. So hopefully you understand what it entails to have a tenant-owned home model. So the second type of mobile home parks is the park-owned home model. So once again, my park had both park-owned homes and tenant-owned homes. So I got a feel for both. So the park-owned home model is the landlord or the park owns the homes and tenants just pay rent. This rent includes the cost of the unit plus lot rent, right? So in my Alabama mobile home park, I charged around $500 to $700 depending on the home. And that included both the lot rent and the cost of the unit. So the landlord is responsible for any maintenance and repairs of the unit, just like apartments, right? Like you're responsible for anything. If the water heater breaks, you're responsible as a landlord. If a tenant moves out and they trash the unit, then you're responsible. So this model obviously has higher operating expense, at least 50% plus. The struggle I had with this model was that tenants would stay month to month. It was hard to get a tenant to commit to a long lease, in the D-class area. And they would, leave it and things would get beat up in the unit because the materials used to renovate mobile homes is not as durable compared to an apartment. So things would get beaten up and I had to go in and turn the unit and sometimes lose money, right? Because if only getting like $500 a month and it costs you $1,000 to renovate again, and you only collected like 3 months of rent, then you really didn't make any money. So that's why it has higher operating expense, and why a lot of syndicators don't like this model, because it's too much work, it's too much tenant turnover, and it's higher operating expense. So that's a huge thing. And this is more common in the lower cost living markets like the Southeast. And once again, Alabama, Georgia, very, very common. So, these parks are more affordable in these areas, but you're going to deal with the park-owned home model. And I was kind of oversold on this model a little bit, which is to my chagrin. But, you live and learn. So, if I were to do a mobile home park again, I would probably stay away from this model. But like you said, if you're able to buy, stabilize it, and deal with it, then it can be a cash cow, if done correctly. But to me, if I'm doing the park owned home model, I'd personally rather just do apartments. It's a little bit easier, a lot simpler, and to be honest, they're way more durable and it's more scalable. So, anyways, the park owner model has fewer lending options. So, a lot of the lenders they say that okay, if I collected $500 in rent, they would say, well, the lot rent's only 200 in that market, so out of that 500 in rent, we only consider that $200 for your net operating income. So that's lowering your net operating income by $300 per door or per mobile home. Then that drops your NOI significantly, which drops down the ARV significantly, right? So that's the downside of park-owned homes. That's why credit financing is a lot more prevalent, but there are some lenders who will consider the income of the park-owned home model. One lender was Vanderbilt. They actually did consider the park-owned home rental income, and that's a question you need to talk to the loan officer when you're trying to finance your mobile home park. Is do you consider the income of the park-owned home, right? So usually, if they do, you're going to pay a higher interest rate. Just so you know. It's easier to evict the tenants. Just like an apartment, you own everything. You just want to evict them. It's a pretty simple process. I had delays because of COVID, but other than that, pretty simple to evict these type of tenants, and they're not as committed because they don't own the home, right? Versus the tenant-owned homes, it was definitely hard to evict those people because they own the home. They felt a sense of entitlement in a way, so it was much harder to evict them. And then ideally, you want to convert tenants from the park-owned home model to the tenant-owned home model, and I'm going to share how in the next slide. So let's talk about the rent-to-own or RTO model. Once again, this is very, very, very popular in the Southeast markets. What's nice about this model is that the tenants pay you rent, which includes lot rent, plus an additional fee, and is responsible for repairs and maintenance. So let's just give an example. The tenant has to pay an additional $50 extra per month over a 5-year period. Let's just say, for simplicity, the rent, including lot rent, is $500 a month. But if they're on a rent-to-own model, they're going to pay me $550 per month over a 5-year period, and at the end of it, they get to own the house. But they're responsible for all the repairs, all the maintenance. So if the water heater breaks, if the toilet is clogged, if the roof starts to leak, if the home needs new skirting, if they need to power wash the outside, they're responsible for all the repairs, all the maintenance, pay you $50 extra per month on top of that over a 5-year period, and the house is theirs. So let's dive into the math. So $50 a month extra times 12 months times 5 years, that's $3,000 over 5 years. A lot of times that's enough to maybe buy that home, right? A lot of these mobile homes, they go down in value over time, which is the downside, right? Like they actually do go down and depreciate in value versus, apartments, they go up in value over time, even though they're older. So, but it basically gives the dream of home ownership to blue collar workers. Because a lot of these workers, they might work at Walmart, very blue collar, minimum wage jobs, and having $3,000 to give you as a down payment to own the home or buy the home, it's probably not feasible. But if you break it down into small bite-sized segments of, $50 a month for, 5 years, they can definitely do that, over that 5-year period. So that sounds great and rosy to say, right? But what's the downside and what's the reality? Is the success rate of the rent-to-own contracts are very low, right? Once one thing breaks, so let's say the water heater breaks, that's going to cost like $500. The tenant cannot afford that and will break their rent-to-own contract, and landlord is now responsible, right? So the rent-to-own model, it's a very tricky model because in the contract, they're responsible for repairs and maintenance, but wasn't they refuse to make any repairs or do any maintenance? And if you were to go to court with this tenant, it's kind of tricky, right? Because basically, technically, even though the contract states they're responsible, but the tenant can claim that, hey, this is like an unlivable condition. because they weren't making their repairs. And ultimately, the bank would or the court would favor in side of the tenant. So at the end of the day, you're stuck fixing this thing anyways. So at the end, if it fails, then they just convert back to being, a renter, a park-owned home model, and you just collect an extra, $50 a month, and now you have to deal with this. And the success rate is very low. Like, I think it was like 20%. It was the average. Double check me on that, but I just know it was very low because, like I said, it's having a renter mindset is different than home ownership. Like, yes, the rent to own model, we did that at my park, and we got a lot of interest. Believe me, because the thought of just paying an extra $50 a month, which is obtainable, $1 a day or $1 or $2 a day, it's very obtainable. But the reality is they don't realize that there's other hidden costs to home ownership, right? If the roof breaks, that costs money. Plumbing issue, that costs money. Versus renters, you just call, you put in a maintenance request, and someone takes care of it for you, right? So there's less responsibility being a renter. So that's why it's a hard model to do. It's definitely popular, but the success rate's not that good. So, to me, what I do is if my park-owned home just got so old and so low in value, you just can sell it real cheap to a tenant, just make it real affordable, and basically they own it and they just pay you a lot rent. So that's what a lot of the mobile home park operators will do instead of the rent to own model. So it sounds great to say on paper, but the reality is it's a lot more challenging than you anticipate. So let's pivot to property management. So typically mobile home parks have a two-pronged approach to property management. The first one is on-site property management, and there's also off-site property management who manages the manager. So the on-site property manager, it's usually a tenant that lives in the park, or it could be a husband and wife combination that lives in the park. So typically their responsibilities include, they'll collect rent, they'll show units to prospective tenants, they'll enforce rules of the park, they'll issue eviction notices, they'll upkeep the lawn, the maintenance areas, common areas, and they'll make sure that the roads are in good condition. So basically they manage everything in terms of the day-to-day. So ideally you want your on-site property manager to be handy to fix little issues and be able to use computers and technology, because the off-site manager is remote and then I'm also remote. So my property manager was a husband-wife tandem. The husband was not very educated, but he was a handyman. I think he was an electrician by trade, so he knew how to deal with electrical issues, which is definitely nice because the two main utilities in mobile homes is, number one, installing the electric panels, and number two is hooking up the plumbing. So he could really do one of the two for me, and that was great. And he also knew how to, renovate things at a very basic level. So usually the property manager as a handyman may not be the best with technology or systems, and that's where the wife came in. She was better at collecting rent from the tenants. She was better at using computers and technology, and she was better at doing paperwork. So kind of together, you kind of have one person that together as a team, maybe they function as one good property manager. So this is very common. Most of the on-site property managers are not going to be very educated. They're not going to be very technology savvy. You have to really teach them on how to do things and remind them how to do things. Like ours did have a phone, but we had to teach them like, okay, well, take a picture of this and send a text message through your phone. Or, just very basic things. They're just very used to very simple, basic processes. So there's a huge learning curve for training an on-site property manager. So I inherited my property manager, which, I thought the time was good, but ended up being bad because he struggled with rent collections. In the D-class mobile home park or, tenant base, you have to be a little bit more firm and aggressive when collecting rent. Like, you have to constantly knock on their door. You have to be aggressive. You have to say, hey, rent was due a couple of days ago. I need to collect rent now or some payment now, or else we're going to evict you. So it requires a stronger personality, and then that's what the wife was able to do. But the problem was the wife had some back issues and was bedbound. So because The tenants knew that she was bedbound and had some back issues. They knew that the husband, when he went to collect the rent, he was soft. So when he would knock on the door, they wouldn't take him seriously. He had no bite. But when the wife knocked on the door, they knew that, oh, she meant business, so they would pay up. So, that ended up becoming one of my downfalls that I will discuss later. But this is typically what the on-site property manager does. For context, I think we paid our on-site property manager about maybe $2,000 a month for all the work that they do. So next is you have off-site property management. So they're typically third-party off-site property management. They'll manage the on-site manager. They'll usually train and onboard the on-site manager, and they'll coordinate the renovations and the infilling process if you're doing a value add project. So they're kind of like a project manager, and they help manage the on-site manager on a day-to-day basis. Mine, they assisted with paying the bills. They gave me financial reports, and they were vital if you're doing a large value add part. So my offsite property manager, a lot of these are rare to find and hard to find, but mine was managing about 70 parks. So I thought they were great because they're managing 70 parks. They've been in the business for 30 years. They said that they're used to dealing with parks like this. And, I drank the Kool-Aid, but, as I discussed later, my offsite property management and my onsite property management is kind of what led me to losing $60,000 on this deal. If you have a good deal and a bad property manager, it's a bad deal. Mine, in my case, was a bad deal with a bad property manager. So that's what led me to losing some money, in full transparency. And it's not like you just can fire an offsite property manager and replace them easily. And same goes with onsite manager. If you fire your onsite manager, then you have to go through the whole process again to train someone brand new, probably someone that lives in the park, to the systems, the processes, and the policies. And like I said, a lot of these people living there, they're not going to be as educated. So it's going to be a bigger learning curve, right? Like if you want someone cheap, that you get what you pay for. So that's kind of how it works. So remember, there's an on-site property manager and an off-site property manager, and the off-site property manager will manage the on-site. So let's talk about the challenges of property management of on-site and off-site. So when dealing with on-site property managers, it's very challenging. They're usually not highly educated. Most of them didn't even graduate high school, for example. They need a lot of instruction and guidance, and you have to constantly repeat yourself, right? Or the off-site manager has to constantly kind of babysit them, give them a lot of instruction, a lot of guidance, and typically this has high turnover since the pay isn't that high. Like I said, I was paying mines about $2,000 a month. They also got to live on the park for free, and since the pay isn't high, it's easy for them to go and get a job somewhere else at Walmart or just anywhere, right? If they're a handyman. So you need to constantly retrain new on-site property managers. Luckily for me, in the 2 years I owned mine, I had the same guy, but honestly, he wasn't that great. He was handy, which is a plus, but he just couldn't collect the rents, and none of the tenants took him seriously in terms of rent collection. So he had a soft spot for the tenants, which I don't blame you. It takes a certain personality, but that's part of the business, right? It's part of the job. Is you got to collect rents. That's probably the most important piece of the job, right? So that's challenging, and if you have to replace it, once again, you start over again, and you're not guaranteed someone great as well. The next one is the third-party offsite property managers for mobile homes aren't as good as property managers for apartments. That I experienced this firsthand. My 2 property managers for apartments were great. They were amazing, and if they didn't perform, I could replace them easily. I had 2 backups. That's what I always teach, right? Have at least 2 backup property managers in case one doesn't perform. But with the third-party offsite property manager for mobile home parks, there's not many of these offsite property managements. Like a lot of the large syndicators, they own their own property management company in-house, but they only manage their own parks. They won't, assist other clients. They just have vertically integrated property management to manage their own parks because they're trying to scale. but so it's hard to find versus apartments, and not many companies um, offer third uh, party offsite property management. So, once again, I thought I hit a gold mine by saying, oh, my offsite, they manage 70 parks. They own 10 parks themselves. So, 60 were for clients, and they would do the whole value add strategy. And I said, this is amazing. Like, why have I never heard of these people? But as I'll go into later, I found out quickly why I'd never heard of these people, because, they don't do as good of a job as they preach. And because of that, you have negative word of mouth, and your reputation is the most important thing, and I just don't think they have a good reputation, despite giving a good talk and marketing themselves very well. They just can't really back it up. So that's what kind of led to my downfall. And once again, property management makes or breaks your deal, and the fact that I had no backup property management for offsite put me in a bind and put me at their mercy. So that I didn't like. When things are out of my control, I don't like it. I don't feel comfortable. So that's why I prefer apartments, because I have more in my control. I could fire my property manager if they don't perform. So that's why they know that, and they perform, versus mobile home parks. They know, hey, there's no alternative, so you're kind of stuck with me. So they kind of give you that C effort mentality, versus the property managers for apartments have to give you that A level effort, or they know that they're going to be replaced. So next, let's talk about the challenges of the mobile home park renovations. So general contractors for mobile homes prefer to get paid on an hourly basis versus project. So all my contractors in Alabama wanted to be paid, like, I forgot what it was, like maybe 10 to 12 bucks an hour. And they prefer that over, okay, how much does it cost to renovate this whole home? Whatever, it's $5,000. That covers your materials and your labor. That's it. And this leads to high turnover, right? Because if you pay someone 10 bucks an hour, well, I can just find a job that pays me 15 bucks an hour, and they're going to leave. So I had at least I had a team of 5 renovating my park. And out of the 5, I had like 5 people turn over throughout the process of a year. And there's low motivation to complete jobs faster. Like, if I'm paid 10 bucks an hour, regardless if I finish doing flooring or not, and just sit there and relax because it's hot, then I get paid the same, right? And that's what I experienced. Like, I had a lot of turnover for people leaving. I had a lot of them work very slow because there's no motivation to go fast, especially if it's humid and hot in Alabama. So that led to delays, and I didn't like that, right? Versus if I pay you on a project, obviously you're a lot more motivated to work faster, because the faster you finish this project, the more money you get, and then more money, or more likely you can move on to the next project. So that's the downside. Another thing too is you cannot buy replacement parts at Home Depot, since the sizing is specialized and different for mobile home parks, for mobile homes. Right? Like for me, I had lots of delays when ordering parts that require shipping. Like, I couldn't go to Home Depot and buy this. I couldn't go to Lowe's and buy this. So it required shipping. And during COVID, we had supply chain issues, manufacturing delays and shipping delays. So things just took a lot longer than needed. Like, if I needed a new window to replace it, I just couldn't go to Home Depot. I had to order it, and it took a while to get there. If I need appliances, they're smaller sized appliances in mobile homes. It takes a while to order it. For skirting for homes, like, I had to order skirting from like Georgia, and then my park was in Alabama, and that took a while to get there. And you can't rent out a home or sell a home unless you have skirting, right? Because it makes it more presentable. And these mobile homes, are not as durable compared to stick-built homes or apartments. So when the tenant leaves, there's gonna be more damages. The floor is not as durable. The walls aren't as durable. Things aren't as durable. So there's gonna be more turnover cost after the tenant leaves the unit. So this were the challenges that I went through. I renovated for about a year. Probably renovated like 40 homes, and I went through all the struggle, right? Like, they were taking a lot longer to fix things up. Like, it took them 5 guys like a month to renovate 1 unit. And that's crazy slow, because for my apartments, I basically took them like, my burned down unit took like maybe 2 months or a month and a half, but it wasn't 5 guys working on it. So definitely there was some slacking going on, and I didn't like that. So that was definitely a challenge that I had, and that's why a lot of mobile home park syndicators, they have renovation crews in house, because it's hard to deal with all these contractor turnover. So they want control, so they have it in house. So next is there's challenges of infilling new homes. So what is infilling a new home? It's when you have an empty lot and you want to bring in a new or used home to place down in your lot. So for me, I had a 200 lot mobile home park. 40 of them were occupied. 160 were unoccupied, which means that I had to infill 160 homes. So this sounds great, right? Like, where else could you bring down a brand new home, get that 100% financed, place the home down, and then sell the home or rent the home? You can't do that with apartments, right? I can't just add like 10 more units to my 26 unit apartment complex. Like, it's not going to be that easy, right? Versus mobile homes. So that's what attracted me to mobile home parks. But there's going to be challenges when you're infilling new homes. So first is, during COVID, there was a huge wait list for new homes, from True Homes, Clayton Homes, using the cash program. There's one more manufacturer. Oh, I'm blanking out on their names, but they're very popular. But their wait list was at least 3 months. I remember during the peak of COVID, with all the supply chain issues and manufacturing issues, they had an 8-month wait list. 8 month. That's a lot of time, right? Like, now, fast forward to today, I could literally order a brand new mobile home and it comes in like 4 weeks, like 2 to 4 weeks, because the home's probably already sitting there. So the ball has changed, right? So when I was infilling during COVID, the homes got more expensive and there was like a huge wait list, and you could pay extra to expedite yourself. But that was ridiculous, right? It never was like that in the past. But lucky me, I bought my park during COVID, and that's how it went. So how does it work to infill new homes? You have to get pre-approved from a lender for a new home line of credit. So the popular one is 21st Mortgage or North Point Commercial, which is based in Georgia. So 21st Mortgage is the more popular one, but they want your park to be a little bit more nicer, a little bit more turnkey. They're a little bit harder to work with, to be honest. So I ended up using North Point because they're willing to work with me and deal with my value add park, because they know that, like, some of these value add parks are not going to be pretty, right? It's not going to be the prettiest girl in the room. Like, it's a tough diamond in the rough. So I use North Point just because they seem easier to work with. But even the application process took me like 3 months to get approved. But once you have that line of credit, so let's say you have a $2 million line of credit, and you just buy up to $2 million of brand new homes. Each home was averaging around 45K. So you can buy, maybe 20, 30 homes, and you can sell them or rent them out. But you only pay for what you use for the line of credit, which is nice. And then the homes, let's say you place an order for a home, they are delivered from the manufacturer to the park. So they just deliver it, whatever, from Georgia to Alabama, and they'll just drop your home near the lot. At that point, you have to coordinate with the installer, who's a separate person. It's not the delivery guy, it's the installer. They're licensed, they're bonded, and they need to install the home. And I thought it was stupid. Like, why does the manufacturer literally drive this home, transport it like, 200 miles, and they just put it next to the lot? Like, why can't they just install it on the lot and have one person do everything? That's not how it works. You have to have an installer, so the delivery has to arrive on time. The installer has to be there. They have to move the home like 6 feet, place it on the lot. At that point, you have to connect all the utilities, water, gas, electricity. Then the utility company needs to go there and sign off on it, right? Like, was everything done appropriately? Was the water connected right? Was electricity done right? Was gas done right? And if you're in a small town, which most mobile home parks are, it takes a long time, right? Things don't move fast in small towns like in big cities, right? Things move at a snail pace. So it might take you, that one guy who works at the electric company, a couple weeks to come inspect everything and sign off on it, right? So it could take you like 2 months sometimes to get signed off between the inspection and then the final approval. So just know this may take a lot longer than you would like. Next, the home needs to be skirted, right? This costs about $800 to $1,000, and we were having delays ordering the skirting because we had to order it and get it shipped from Georgia, right? So this is another struggle, and at that point, you can rent or sell the home. So ideally, you want to sell the homes, and then it replenishes your line of credit, right? If I use $45,000 to bring in a new home, and maybe I sell it for $50,000, that's nice, right? You get a 5K profit, and then your line of credit gets paid off, and then you can buy another home and bring in another home to infill and sell that home. Or if you can't sell it, you can rent it out too, right? And the hope is the rent will cover the cost of the line of credit, and then you can then continue to scale and leverage that way. So overall, in this infilling process, there's a lot of points in the process. There's a lot of points of failure. There's a lot of delays, and delays lose money, right? Time is money, right? And in this process of infilling, there's a lot of ways to lose time and to lose money. So another way is infilling used homes. Very popular as well, right? But the issue is there's a limited supply of used homes. That's why I did new homes only, because the thought of finding a used home, you have to take it out of one park, pay for delivery to your park, then installed by installer, and most likely those used homes need renovation and damage occurred during transportation. There's a reason why that other park was selling the home. They want to make their park look nicer. They want to upgrade their homes. Maybe it needs a renovation. So you have to pay like $5,000 to buy the home. Almost like $2,000 to $4,000 to transport the home, install the home, and then maybe another $5,000 to $6,000 to renovate the home. So you're all in for what? Almost $20,000. I'd rather just buy a brand new home, get that fully financed, 100% financed through a line of credit, and then have a new home and make the park look better. So that's why for me, I typically preferred newer homes, but some people like the used home model for infilling. And then same thing, right? Connect utilities, get it inspected, skirt the homes. You can rent those, sell those to the tenant, and as I mentioned earlier, there's many points in the process, increases the chance of delays and failure. It's not easy. So why my park lost money? As you can see here, there's a lot of reasons why. Overall I lost $60,000 on the deal, which isn't too bad considering that I made every single mistake in the book, as you can see. I will say that to preface this, I did have to sell or carry second a note when I sold this deal to the next owner. So, they took over my existing loan and I had to do a seller carry second to reduce the down payment, but I'm getting paid interest on this money that I'm carrying in second lien position, and I'm doing a 3-year balloon. So by the time the 3 years is up, hopefully the new owner is done with their value add strategy, and I would be paid back about $80,000 over 3 years. So actually going to make my money back and break even, make a little bit of money, but my money is kind of trapped there for 3 years, right? So overall, it's a break even, a lesson learned. But my money and capital are trapped until the new owner finishes their value add strategy. So why? Why did my park lose money? The first reason was bad on-site property management, and let me explain. So my on-site property manager was husband-wife. Guy was named Tommy, wife was Jennifer, and Tommy was great. Like, he was an electrician, he was a great handyman. He was decent at managing the renovation crews, and he was a nice guy, right? I think he wanted to do the right things. He had the right intentions, but where he definitely struggled was with rent collections. He had a hard time being a kind of a bad cop, confrontational person to collect rents, and that's how you have to be when you're working with D-class tenants. You have to be a little bit more aggressive, unfortunately, a little bit more confrontational. You have to be persistent and, knock every day, every other day, and make it known that when you knock on the door that, they need to pay rent, right? And he just didn't have that personality. Nothing against him, it wasn't his strength. So we had to rely on Jennifer, who was his wife. She was better at collecting rents. She was more aggressive. The tenants knew that when Jennifer knocked, they would have to pay. And same thing with Chuck. Chuck was their security guard. He would knock on the door, and they knew when Chuck knocked that they would have to pay. So that's great when Jennifer and Chuck were there. But what happened to me was Jennifer had a back issue. She was bedbound, so she couldn't collect the rent. And the tenants knew that, right? Word spreads fast in a small community. So they knew that, oh, Jennifer is not there. And then Tommy or Chuck, the security guard, he got in a car accident. So he was out for like, 3 to 5 months. So because of that, they knew that, okay, Chuck and Jennifer are both out, who they were afraid of, and it's only Tommy left. And they knew that, well, if Tommy asked, they don't pay. So, I had bad on-site property management, or maybe just, unlucky with Jennifer and Chuck being out. But, if they're out, then I just set that next man up for the job, and, Tommy had to deliver, and he couldn't. So I was telling my off-site property manager that, like, hey, we got to find someone new if this guy can't deliver, because it's great that he can renovate, it's great that he can manage people, but if you can't collect the rent, that's the basic duty of a property manager, is rent collection. So I was telling my offsite property manager, who also was bad, that hey, we got to find someone new, but they kept on saying no, like, I think my offsite property manager has a soft spot for Tommy. Once again, he's a nice guy, he has a family, and they just didn't want to like fire him and train someone new, because it's a lot of work to train someone new, right? So, my offsite property manager was being lazy as well. And I just said that, well, you know, if the on-site manager doesn't perform, then you start to look bad as the off-site property manager, and I'm gonna hold you guys accountable and find replacements for you. But they knew that, like, you can't just fire off-site property manager and hire someone new, and they knew that, right? They knew that there's no one else out there at that time. So I had a perfect storm where my off-site property manager was bad and my on-site property manager is bad, and it's hard to replace both. I can't just fire my off-site property manager and find another one. I had to take over operations, and I couldn't do that because I'm working full-time and I'm doing value add for 2 other apartments. My on-site property manager, there's limitations, right? You're paying these guys $2,000 and they're great at one thing and bad at another thing, right? So kind of pick your poison, unfortunately. And another area was a high crime area, a high crime location. So this park was near Montgomery, Alabama, which isn't the most safest area. I thought there was potential. I thought, when I visit on site, I did check out the sheriff's office, and he did say that my park had the highest crime area. But I knew cops are usually more pessimistic because they see the worst things. But it ended up being true, right? Like, I had a part-time security guard, Chuck, and since Chuck was there, things got better, right? Things got better at the park. Things got better. Crime went down because people knew, oh, if you go to the park, the security guard will be there and Chuck will catch you and then do like a arrest and notify the cops. So I think while he was there, he did catch like, at least 3 to 4 people over the 2 years that I was there, and turn them to the police. And despite being a high crime area, I remember talking to the police office and asking, hey, like, we have an office here. Would it be okay to station one of your officers here? We're happy to give you computers, some coffee, some donuts, just to relax, and they can take their notes. And, the sheriff said, well, it's a liability issue, so we can't do it. I just said, well, can you at least send a cop to do rounds in my park? Because I'm trying to fix it up. And he said he would. And, honestly, they didn't really change. And I had to, have a full-time security guard. Went from part-time to full-time to make sure that, this area was safe, so that people would live there, right? Because I'm trying to sell these new homes. I'm trying to rent out these new homes and trying to remove that bad reputation that the park had. So I had to pay for a security guard. So, what I learned was no amount of money can fix a high crime area. Like, you can fix the units, you can buy security, but it still has that bad reputation. So, it goes to the old adage of real estate: location, 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 and you can't compromise location. So, I learned that don't buy in D-class areas, right? Like, my apartments are C-class, and C-class has some issues, but D-class is the next level, right? Like, there's so much crime that happens in D-class. So, once again, that's a mistake that I made. The next thing too is I had high operating expense. I had the park-owned home model majority and 55 acres of land. And Jesus, it's so expensive to deal with all those operating expense. Like for context, I was collecting $8,000 in rent a month, and on average, my expense all in for everything, including the loans, was 18,000. So I was losing $10,000 a month on this park. So when you have 55 acres of land, there's a lot of grass, right? Like you have to have a full time lawnmower guy who's goes from one end of the park to the other end of the park, and by the time you're done, the grass on the other end grew again. There's a lot of trees there, so before the hurricane season comes, you gotta like trim down these trees. Like if it's near a power line, the power company will do it for you. But if it's like not near a power line, you get to trim it down yourself, and it costs $700 a tree to trim these 100-foot trees. You have to pay for roads. You have to pay for the lights. There's a lot of lighting that is required to make a 55 acres of land feel safe and well lit at night. So there's just a lot of these expenses, right? The sewer expense, the security guard, the on-site property manager, the off-site property manager, the water bill, electricity bill, maintenance of the roads, lawn mowing, maintenance of the homes. It just was like crazy expensive. Like I said, I was collecting 8,000 in rent, and my expense was literally $18,000 a month. So that's the challenge. And then another part was it was just hard to evict tenants in general during COVID. So I had tenant-owned homes as well as park-owned homes, and it was hard to evict both. Much harder to evict the tenant-owned homes, as I explained earlier, but for the park-owned homes, it was still hard to evict because it was COVID. Like the tenants could claim that, hey, I have COVID, I can't go to the court date, and it would delay another like 3 to 4 weeks, and then they would claim again another 3 to 4 weeks, and again and again and again, right? So, and it cost me money. It cost me like $800 to evict a tenant who's paying $200 in lot rent, or $800 to evict a tenant paying me $500. So I was trying to do like cash for keys, like, hey, I'll just pay you like $400, which is half the cost to evict if you just give me the keys and you leave, right? So that was the model that I was trying to do. And overall, there's lower quality tenants and there's more tenant turnover because this is a D class area. You get D class tenants who don't pay their rent. You get D class tenants who don't follow the rules. And you have D class tenants who they'll turn over, right? They'll live there for like 3 months and then they'll move somewhere else because it's cheaper and they just want to move somewhere else. So that's the thing I had to deal with, and that's why it was hard. Like I would rent out a unit or renovate a unit, I'd rent it out, and then another tenant would leave, or they would leave after like a couple months, or they would move in and pay for 2 months and then stop paying after 2 months, and I had to evict them. So it was a constant battle where I'd rent out one unit, and then I'd lose a unit, and I had to rent that unit out, right? So I don't want to deal with that headache of a D class tenant ever again. Next was there's high turnover in contractors. Once again, right? Like I had a team of 5 contractors to renovate the park, but since they're paid minimum wage on an hourly basis, there's constant turnover. They would leave, they would flake out, they wouldn't show up to work. So many different reasons, right? Like a lot of the contractors would rent out a unit, and it was crazy. Like they would rent out a unit and not pay their rent, but I'm paying them on a weekly basis for their services. And I'm like, I tell my offsite property manager, like, why are we paying these people? Like, if they didn't pay their rent, why am I paying them for their labor for contracting? Like, we should deduct the rent from their income. Like, if let's say we're paying them $500 a week, and they didn't pay me their rent of $300 for that month, then for that week we should just take the $300 from their income, and then just pay them $200 because they owe me rent. Right? Like I was just confused by that. Maybe it was, liability issues or whatever. But I was just like, that's ridiculous. Like, why are we paying this guy who's a contractor, but he hasn't paid his rent? Like, how bad is the property management that our general contractors that we pay aren't even paying rent? So I was very frustrated with that piece. And then the next thing was not enough capital. So, I had about half a million or $400,000 allocated to renovating these homes, and I was hoping by the time I had 400,000 of renovation, my cash flow would increase significantly to the point where the cash flow could be used to renovate the other existing homes. So, if I had $8,000 in cash flow a month, that 8,000 can renovate one more home, and it would just kind of snowball itself, right? But what I quickly found was that my $400,000 was a drop in the bucket. Like the new owners that are buying the park are putting in at least double or triple the capex I put in to bring the park all the way. So I didn't like how the property manager, my third party property manager, who was also my broker, they kind of oversold me that I had enough capital on the deal, and they showed me a performer plan, which was overpromised and underdelivered. So I'm pretty disappointed in that aspect, but it makes sense, right? Those My property manager makes money when I buy the park because he gets his little, broker fee or whatever, or consulting fee. So of course he wants me to buy it, but I didn't like how they overpromised and underdelivered, and they just gave me a bunch of bullshit and talked out of their ass, but they couldn't deliver, and I hate that the most, right? Like I hate it when you talk but you don't walk, right? Talk the talk but you don't walk the walk. So that's why I just said, you know what? That's what led me to selling this park was like I just want to be over this and not deal with this park anymore and just deal with my apartments, which are doing a lot better, right? And what happened to me was I had a buyer who got the park under contract, and if that buyer actually went through, I would have made about $300,000 on the park, which would have been a home run, right? I would have gotten back my initial capital, like all the money I put into the deal, and I'd have $300,000, which was my profit, be in a second note position, getting me interest payments every month. So I thought that's a win-win situation. I get all my money back, all my initial capital back. The profit that I have is being held in the deal, and I'm earning interest on that money, getting paid on a monthly basis to increase my cash flow position. So I thought that was a win-win situation, but literally on the day of closing, I mailed my documents out, and he ghosted me at the last minute. And I gave this guy, initially it was a 3-month contract, right? No, it was a 45-day contract to basically do the deal. There was no bank involved, so he was going to raise the capital. And I gave him, he got the park under contract in mid-January, and we're supposed to close end of March. I gave him from the end of March all the way till the end of July an additional 3 months to raise the money. He couldn't do it. He backed out last minute. I just kept his earnest money deposit. And then I brought in the second buyer. But obviously the second buyer, they lowballed me to the point where I was going to lose about $60,000. But I just said, you know what? I'm just over this park. I don't want to deal with this anymore, and I'm okay taking that loss. Like I said, I'm doing a seller carry second note in position, and I'm getting paid interest on that, so that would pay back my $60,000. So overall, it's going to be kind of like a break even, but my money is trapped there for the next 3 years. And this buyer actually did pull through. We had a little hiccup where his partner actually backed out, but he was able to find a replacement partner, and they was able to buy the park. So for me, it sucks that I lost 60K, but at least I learned my lesson. I learned a lot, and I just want to move on and not deal with mobile home parks ever again, right? And then another factor, interest rates went up. Obviously when I bought the park in end of 2021, interest rates were like what, less than 4%, and fast forward till today, it's 8%, 9%. So that definitely detracted away a lot of buyers as well. And then also my park lost money because there's not many buyers, right? When you want to sell a single family home, there's a lot of buyers. When you want to sell an apartment complex, there's a lot of buyers. When you want to sell a mobile home park, self-storage, industrial, triple net, your buyer pool is a lot smaller, so it's not as easy to sell those assets, right? And that's a lesson that I learned. Like, it took me almost 10 months to sell my mobile home park. But if I want to sell any of my apartments, like literally I could probably sell it like easily in like 2-3 months. Easily, right? So that was my lesson that I learned, and why I lost money in my park. So hopefully you learn and don't make the same mistakes as me. So let's talk about the lessons I learned after selling my mobile home park. So as you can see, there's a lot of lessons I learned. You learn more through failure, actually. You learn more by making mistakes. And it's just a part of real estate entrepreneurship, right? The key is to keep on going. Don't lose all your money on one deal, and to never make the same mistake again. So here are the lessons learned. So to be successful with a mobile home park, you need to be vertically integrated. What does vertically integrated mean? It means that you have to have a property manager off-site, in-house, and on-site. You need an installer in-house. You need a renovation crew in-house. Whatever is needed has to be in-house. Why is that? It's because, as I mentioned, it's hard to get a property manager. If you have a bad property manager off-site, it's hard to replace. So if you're trying to buy a mobile home park, or you want to invest in a mobile home park syndicator, it's best to make sure that they're vertically integrated. In order to be vertically integrated, you must have a big enough portfolio, right, to justify that. But for all those reasons, you want control of your property manager in-house. The installer needs to be in-house, so your value add plan of infilling mobile homes shouldn't be dependent on one person. You want to have your own installer in-house and renovation crew as well. Once again, they flake out, the third party ones flake out. There's a lot of turnover and the quality may not be as good, but if you have a renovation crew in-house, that's great. So for me, to be successful, you have to own a lot of mobile home parks and be vertically integrated. If you're just doing one or two parks, honestly, I don't think it's worth it to do a mobile home. You're better off just investing in apartments, single family homes, or vetting a mobile home park syndicator and making sure that they are vertically integrated. Right. So the next bullet point is do not compromise location. Right? Location, location, location. On my park, it was a D-class neighborhood. The crime was too high. And no amount of money can fix a high crime area. Right? I definitely learned this. I had to pay for a full-time security guard. Despite that, they did, catch a lot of people trying to, commit crime on the park, or it would deter them from doing crime. But it comes as an extra cost where you're paying an additional $1,800 a month just to have a full-time security guard. So it makes it hard to do your value add plan. It makes it hard to cash flow, and it definitely increases your net or decreases your net operating income. So do not compromise on location. So location, location, location still stands. I am a more advanced real estate investor, and I still make the mistake, right? So I thought I could fix it, but here's my lesson. I cannot fix in high crime area with any amount of money, right? Unless it's, gentrifying in the path of progress, different story, but this one wasn't in the path of progress. Next lesson, which hit me hard as well, was mobile parks require more time, more money, more energy, but if done successfully, can force a lot of equity, right? So the point of this PowerPoint isn't to discourage you from investing in mobile home parks yourself or investing with a mobile home park syndicator. It's just more to give you a realistic look into the insights of what it's like to operate a mobile home park. I mean, I actually tried to sell my mobile home park to the top 5 mobile home park operators, and just by having a conversation with the acquisition manager, I just could tell that they were not as organized as I expected. Like, I literally gave them my park on a hand platter, and they were being very difficult to work with. Like, I would email them everything they wanted. They would take forever to respond. I would call them, and I thought that was weird because usually you want motivated sellers to come to you, but it just seemed like they were putting out fire after fire after fire after fire, and it just seemed like a dumpster fire, for lack of a better word. So I think that's just the sense of what mobile home parks is. Like, it's always a dumpster fire, but if you can make it work, you can make a lot of money on the deal, right? Like, don't get me wrong, and it makes sense, right? If I'm putting more time, more energy, more money, I expect a better return. But does it make sense if you're working full time like me? Does it make sense if you only want to own 1 or 2 mobile home parks? It may not, right? You're better off just, like for me, investing in apartments where I can do it while working full time. And I have a team in Oklahoma. I have a system in Oklahoma, and I know the market in Oklahoma. So, and I know I can do that with less time, energy, and effort, but my return's going to be a little bit less, right? So you really have to evaluate if this makes sense for you. And I will say for 95% of apartment investors, it probably doesn't make sense. It's just shiny object syndrome, right? The next bullet point is there's not many on-site and off-site property management options. So off-site third-party management is near impossible, right? Like, if I wanted to fire my off-site property manager, there's no replacement. For the on-site property manager, like, you have to get another tenant that's in your park. Usually they're going to be somebody who is handy. Somebody, depending on your market, has to be, more aggressive, more confrontational to get those tenants to pay rent. if you're in a D-class market. So, it's not many options. And even if you do find a replacement for on-site property manager, it takes a while to train them, right? You have to start over from scratch and retrain them as to your specific procedures and policies and like how you want things done, right? So there's that initial learning curve, and that person may not work out either. So it's not like apartments or residential, where it's easy to plug and play property managers. The next point that I mentioned earlier was there's many points in the process with mobile home parks, right? There's a lot more factors, especially when infilling a home compared to like renovating an apartment. And when you have more points in the process, there's more points of failure, which leads to more money, right? Like for apartments, I literally had two value add apartments, and all I did was renovate all the apartments, all the same, copy and paste, and didn't really think much about it. Same materials in all units, same paint, same flooring, same kitchen, same everything, right? And I had a property manager managing it, who was managing my general contractor, and it was so hands off. Like I spent probably 20% of my time, energy, and money on my two apartment complexes, and those made money. Those made me a killing. Versus my mobile home park, I spent 80% of my time, money, and energy, and I lost money on the deal. So if you do the 80-20 principle, obviously I should go all in on apartments. And I did have an opportunity to buy an apartment instead of this mobile home park at the time. It was a 50 unit that I turned down. And, had I bought it, I think I would be less stressed. Definitely better off financially, wouldn't have taken my first loss. And, maybe not be as jaded, but I think I need to learn this lesson. I needed to get punched in the gut, and it's bound to happen, right? Like I've been investing for 6 years, and this is my first loss. Every other deal I've done has made me money, but that's not realistic. So, that's, the pains of investing in real estate and the risk that you have to take. And the next bullet point is, a value add mobile home park like mine. Mine was heavy value add, right? I had to, basically turn my tenants over because they weren't paying, renovate a bunch of units, tear down a bunch of units, and infill a bunch of units. And, did that with, bad on-site property management and bad off-site property management. So you need a full-time team to help you ensure success, right? It's hard to be successful doing this while working full-time like me, because I have to depend on property managers who are not as good. Off-site property managers who are not as good, right? So, like I said, if I was not working and I had boots on the ground and I was actually staying at the park, maybe this park could be successful. But trying to leverage my time and my money, it just didn't work, right? So just keep that in mind. If you're going to do a value-add mobile home park, it's going to be a lot more work than you anticipate. So next are some additional lessons that I learned. Like I said, you learn the most when you fail and when you lose money and when you're stressed versus when you're successful and not stressed, right? So when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling like you lost, just take a step back, self-reflect, and just soak in as much information as you can, because this is when you will grow the most as a real estate investor, right? So, with mobile home parks, maintaining infrastructure is expensive. I have 55 acres of land. There's a bunch of like roads there, and over time, since it rains there a lot, there's humid, there's cracks in the road. So you gotta maintain the infrastructure, right? You gotta patch the roads. You gotta tear down trees, which are expensive. You gotta mow the grass. During the rainy season, the weeds grow rapidly. You have to deal with, crime and hire a security guard. You have to install security gates. You got to replace the septics, right? If there's issues with the septic, you got to maintain all these lights. So just maintaining the overall infrastructure of mobile home parks, especially if you have a lot of acreage of land, it's going to be expensive, right? That's why my expense ratio is so crazy. Obviously, if like all 200 lots are filled, I would have enough money to cover my expenses. But because I was only at 40 of 200, and out of the 40, 80% may be paid at best. So it's expensive, right? And then another lesson I learned is, dealing with mobile home park brokers, mobile home park lenders, mobile home park installers and buyers. They're more challenging, and it's monopolized, right? Like it's a harder industry to break into There's a reason why most of the mobile home park industry, I call them white hairs, right? They've been in the industry for a long time. Because you get cheated a lot, everyone acts a certain way. Like the mobile home park brokers will only sell deals to people they know, and that makes sense because most people flake out. Like I learned, my buyer literally flaked out on the last day, and even my second buyer who ended up closing, his partner backed up on the last minute, but he was able to find another partner to fill that gap. But a lot of people who buy mobile home parks, it's an acquired taste. It requires a certain personality, and I will say they're a little bit more challenging, more flaky, move slower, not as transparent, and it's monopoly, and they can get away with that because it's monopolized, right? Like in apartments, I don't have to deal with brokers who are you know crooked, right? I don't have to deal with lenders that are crooked or buyers that are terrible. If the buyer's terrible in my apartments, I just move on, right? I teach you can't do a good deal of a bad person, but in a mobile park industry, most people are unfortunately going to lean towards being bad, right? Like installers. If there's only one installer in Montgomery, Alabama, he can charge here's the price, whatever it is, or he can get injured and be sick, and now you have no installer, right? And they can charge whatever price they want. The mobile home park manufacturers like Clayton Homes, they monopolize the industry. Like they can determine the price, they can determine how long it takes to build, and you're at their mercy, right? Same with the utility companies in small towns. They monopolize everything too. Where I remember my trash company, there's only one in Montgomery, and they basically had bad service, never took the trash, and I couldn't really do anything, right? Like, hey, we just call and they say they pick it up, and it just was not consistent. Like, they're supposed to pick it up every Tuesday, they never did. So, when you're going to the mobile home park space, just know that every person that you're dealing with, brokers, lenders, installers, buyers, property management, manufacturers, anybody, it's going to be harder. It's going to be more challenging, more stressful, and more monopolized. So, for me, I'm just like, the apartment space, so easy, right? So I'm like, okay, it just doesn't make sense for me to do mobile home parks for me, right? It may make sense for you, but for me, it doesn't make sense. And the next bullet point is you're better off investing with a vertically integrated mobile home park syndicator versus buying one or two mobile home parks yourself. Especially if you want to diversify into mobile home parks. So a lot of people reach out to me asking, hey, Steven, I own mobile home or apartments, single family homes. I want to go into mobile home parks. I heard they're a cash cow. And I just said, literally, I'll just point to my videos and just say, to be honest, you're better off just doubling down on what you're already good at and what you have systems for, whether that's single families or apartments. And because, while it sounds cool on paper, and when you listen to all the podcasts, and, that's a shame on the podcast industry is, of course they're going to give a more optimistic, rosy picture of mobile home parks because they want to raise money from you and want you to invest with them, right? That's their goal. For me, I'm not trying to, syndicate a mobile home park or, that's not my objective. My objective is just to share my experience and, just to consider this before you dive into your own park to know what to expect, right? Like I said, as long as you kind of go in with some baseline understanding of what to expect, then my job is done. So like you said, from my experience, you're better off just investing with a vertically integrated mobile home park operator, and instead of buying one or two yourself, or if you just double down on what you're already doing, right? Like for me, it would be buying more apartments in Oklahoma, or I can find a big operator of mobile home parks and invest with them if I want that diversification, right? Next lesson, which I kind of touched upon, is no shiny object syndrome and stick to one thing. It's very natural. You go from single family home and you shiny object syndrome into apartments. From apartments, you shiny object syndrome into mobile home parks. And I did all three, right? Had I just stuck to apartments, I would be in a better financial position today than I was buying that mobile home park. But like I said, I probably needed to get hit, punched, and make a mistake and lose money to learn this lesson, right? Like, despite hearing it, like you always think, oh, I'm exempt from this issue. No, you're not. You're gonna suffer the same fate. So just do your one thing. Like I wanted self-storage too. And now I'm like, forget self-storage. If I want to do self-storage, then I'll invest with a syndicator. Easy, right? So no shiny object syndrome. Stick to one thing. Next lesson learned is more land equals more operating expense, right? Apartments don't have much land, right? Like when my apartments have a little bit of land, I just mow the grass. That's it. Easy. When you own 55 acres of land, so keep in be cognizant of how many acres of land there is. And yes, more land means expansion potential, right? That's definitely a plus. But if you're not expanding, or you don't have that initial capital up front, then just know the more acreage of land you have, there's going to be more operating expense, right? You need more, um, pay a lawn guy to mow the grass, more trees to cut down, more lights to light up the park, more roads to repair. Just a lot more things going on, right? So more land is more operating expense. And like I mentioned earlier, dealing with on-site property management and off-site is difficult, and the on-site property manager is not going to be as educated, right? They're not going to be the brightest light bulb in the room. They may not be good with technology, so you really have to be patient with these people. And like I like being hands off in my property management. I am with my apartments, but with mobile home parks, you can't be as hands off. You have to be very hands on. So for me, I'm doing real estate for passive income, and I know it's not truly passive, but to be a little bit more leveraged and a little bit more hands off. And I feel like I got that with apartments compared to mobile home parks. So, what's your cup of tea? Do you want to be hands on? Then mobile home parks may work for you. If you don't want to be hands on, then maybe something else, right? Next is it takes forever to do simple tasks in smaller towns. Like I said, if I want to evict the tenant and there's one judge, and that one judge is doing all the eviction cases in that town, then things will be backed up. If there's only one trash company in your town, things are going to take longer. If there's one guy who works at the utility company and he does all the inspections, then things are going to take time, right? So things move slow in smaller towns, not like the city where I'm used to things happening immediately, right? Apartments, things happen immediately. With mobile home parks, happens slowly. And the last bullet point is mobile home parks require a large amount of capital. I blew through $300,000 of capital easily and didn't have near enough what I needed to do. Like the new owners are, I think, bringing in double or triple what I am bringing in to bring the deal all the way. So I completely underestimated how much capital I needed, which probably led to me losing money on this deal because I had to just offset it and move on. So mobile home parks, especially value add, require large amounts of capital, right? Just ring that in your head. You need a lot of capital. This one's hard to do with minimum leverage. My apartments, I definitely leveraged into those with low money down, not much money, and I just spent most of the money fixing things up. Mobile home park, it's not going to be the same. You need a lot of capital into the deal, which is why I gave the new owner a low down payment, because I knew he was going to have to put in close to $1 million of capex just to renovate this park. So a lot of capital is needed. So for part 3 of lessons learned, it takes longer to sell a value-add mobile home park. With my apartments, I get cold calls, cold emails, cold text messages from people with cash wanting to buy both my apartments. But with my mobile home park, no one reaches out to me. They're hard to sell. It's not as hot of a commodity, right? I mean, it takes a certain type of buyer to want to do a mobile home park, and that's a smaller pool of buyers, right? So it literally took me like 10 months to sell my mobile home park, and it took me a while to get a good buyer at a good price that made me money, but he ended up not being able to raise the money because it's hard to raise money too for mobile home parks because it takes also a certain type of investor, right? Like people don't invest in mobile home parks as a limited partner out the gate. Typically they'll invest in apartments first, right? That's always the easiest stepping stone, and then once they are more advanced or have more capital, then they might invest in a limited partner in a mobile home park fund. So it's harder to raise money. It's hard to sell. It takes a specific buyer, and most people, they want to buy a mobile home park with instant cash flow, right? But if you buy a value add park or like my park, you're coming in negative cash flow, right? That's why I had to give very good terms on the deal, very good terms on seller financing, and I deferred interest for 6 months because I know that they're going to be pumping a lot of cash into this deal, and I want them to be successful and get my money back. So that's what you have to do, right? And because of that, mobile parks require a lot more work than apartments. Like my apartments, I renovated all 46 units, without much effort, to be honest. Like I let them pick the materials, how to renovate it. I just kind of gave them big picture. Like I want it very, tenant proof. modern, that's popular in that area, and they'll just tell me, hey, this royal blue is really popular right now. We should, paint the exterior royal blue, or the doors royal blue. Like, hey, this is really popular in this market, fire engine red. Like, they just tell me, right? So, mobile home parks require a lot more effort, a lot more work. And, as I mentioned earlier, all mobile home park operators are complete dumpster fires. Even the top 5 operators and owners, right? You can Google who those are, but I reached out to all of them, and I just can sense that they were just putting out fires every day, and, they're the best in the game. So what that tells me is when you're doing mobile home parks, it's always a dumpster fire, right? And, even the best people in the industry operate as if it's a fire every day, and that's not what I want to do, right? I don't want to invest in real estate for that. I'd rather just buy an apartment that maybe doesn't have as much upside, maybe not as much cash flow, but I'm not dealing with dumpster fires every day. So, not my cup of tea. So that's why I'm probably not going to invest actively in mobile home parks. Maybe I will invest with a mobile home park syndicator, passively, right? And maybe put like $50,000 into that, or whatever the minimum is. In the mobile home park industry, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of monopolies. People sabotage the industry, and they may not do business the proper way, and they pick their terms, right? Like, they may pick how they want things done, and I heard that a lot from a lot of the mobile home park manufacturers. They basically choose their terms, they do business crooked, and they know they can get away with it. So just be wary that may happen to you if you're investing in mobile home parks. And the last one is you want to stay away from the park owned home model, right? You don't want to own those homes as a landlord. You want to have a tenant owned home model where you just get paid lot rent. It's easier, less operating expense, it's more scalable. The property manager just has to worry about collecting lot rent. And if you do buy a park owned homes, then just sell those homes immediately, even for a loss, right? Just get rid of those homes, like, just stay away. So, hopefully you found value from this case study. Definitely is painful, and bringing back the painful memories of me losing $60,000. But as always, I try to be fully transparent and share my ups and my downs, because I felt like I didn't hear this type of content when I was buying a mobile home park, and I listened to a lot, right? They're all optimistic, rosy, only things can go great. They would mention one or two things going bad, but, I felt like I've had every bad thing happen to me, and relatively speaking, came out, not too bad, not too damaged, still live to fight another day. All my capital is trapped in this deal still, but I'm earning interest on it, so it's going to be harder for me to invest now. But the key is to come in, like, investing in real estate, it's not about what you know, it's about what you don't know and how to prepare for what you don't know. Because there's always those unknown unknowns, is what I call it, right? Like, for me, of course I listen to a bunch of podcasts. You can do the mobile home park boot camp, from Frank and Dave, and even that stuff was just very generic and try to get you excited about investing in mobile home parks, to invest in their mobile home parks. But once you own and operate one, you definitely learn, and you're gonna get punched in the gut. And the key is to be able to survive. And in order to survive, you have to, number one, be able to problem solve. Number two, make quick decisions. And number three is you have to have the capital to back it up. And I quickly learned that I didn't have enough capital to sustain, and that's why I started to sell my mobile home park 10 months ago, because I knew that I had about 10 months worth of capital left. So it was in my bench to just sell this and just move on, right? So hopefully you learned from this, and hopefully this gave you some clarity, like me, where I just want to invest in apartments. That's why I teach apartment complex investing, because it's easier. I had more success in it, and it's definitely doable while working full time, right? Versus a mobile home park, it's not doable while full time, based on my personal experience. So hopefully you learned your lesson, and maybe this deterred you away from a deal that you were thinking about doing. But thanks to this lecture, you are shying away from it, which is great, right? It's okay to say no to deals, especially if it's going to lose you money, right? Because I don't want you to lose money like me. So hopefully you found value from this one. Please share this with somebody who wants to invest in a mobile home park, and hope to see you in the next one. Thank you so much.